Good afternoon and welcome back to the Return Homestead. My name is Mike and my wife Marty and I homestead 6 acres in northeastern Kentucky. We are still battling the rain out there, guys. It is pouring down. It has been gray and nasty all day. We did make a trip out earlier this morning because we wanted to get a lighting system to put here in the kitchen. There's only so many things you can do outside on a day like today, so we try to make sure we have projects that we can work on indoors. Typically, here on the homestead, we would have all sorts of food processing that needed to be done this time of year, but since we moved, instead of harvesting from our garden at the end of the year, we don't have any canning work to do. So we're going to switch over to lighting so that when the season comes next year, we're going to have good lighting here in the kitchen. So when we moved into the house, one of the first things that we noticed was that lighting here in the kitchen, it's weak. The only fixture that was put in was this ceiling fan. The ceiling fan gives us only 4 little light bulbs that we can use to light up the entire kitchen. And these tiny little light bulbs, they're not really designed to light up a room. This is supposed to be accent lighting. So this is light that draws attention. And we've put it directly over a black countertop. And so this tiny little bit of light down here on this black countertop, it just leaves things almost invisible. So even things like this track disappear when you set them down on the countertop. So we've got to do something about the lighting. Marty has several requests out for videos right now. There are some videos she's been dying to get in here and get made. But with the lighting like it is right now, the videos would be weak at best, as you can tell from the lighting situation we're dealing with now. So today we're going to be taking care of that by installing the track lighting that we've chosen. This is function over form. The whole point is to get light from up top down onto the countertops and down onto the floor and walls so that you can see the room around you. So we're going to de-accent the lights themselves and accent instead the things that we're trying to light up. That's why I like track lighting. We've never had an instance where it could be installed or needed to be installed, but this is definitely one of them because one other issue we have is the only power source is here at the ceiling fan. So this is the only place I have to grab switched power and install a lighting fixture. So I've got to take this power and move it around the entire kitchen, and there's no drywall up here to work with. So unlike our previous remodel where we could just poke a hole through the drywall and run a new wire, there's no way to do that here with this ceiling. One of the things you'll notice if you decide to use track lighting is there's not a lot of good instructions on exactly what to do with this stuff. Mostly they want you to buy a kit, and we did buy a couple of kits, but we bought kits for a much better reason. We bought the kits because it got us the section of track that we needed. It got us 3 light fixtures to go on that track and a couple of fittings to connect it to power, and it was $5 less than had we bought all those components separately. So we saved ourselves $5 by buying the packs to get these 4-foot rails that we're going to need for our installation. But then most of what goes on up here we had to figure out ourselves, and it is specific to our installation needs, and all track lighting installs are going to be that way. You're going to have to look at the room that you're trying to light and figure out where the tracks need to go. There's no one set best way to install this stuff. Step 1, if you want to make sure you finish the project and you don't die, you want to make sure you turn the power off. This is the first opportunity I've had to look inside panel here and see exactly where things are. Downstairs lights, down lights, up plugs, upstairs, down light plugs, dishwasher, range. All right. And it does not appear exactly where these might be. Hey, look at that on the very first try. I'm not sure what I'm doing here, baby. Away from
Oops.
Okay. So first thing we want to do is get this ceiling fan out of the way. I'm just taking off all the glass globes and the light bulbs, anything that might fall or break easily. You have to look at the different light fixtures. There's lots of different ways that these globes are attached. And this particular fixture has a little nut that goes inside of the globe and then attaches to the lighting fixture itself. Taking down ceiling fans can be a tricky business, so take your time, move slow.
No dropping.
The ceiling fans can be a little bit tricky if you're not familiar with them or you've never installed one or seen how these work. You got this little plate that covers where the ceiling fan actually hooks up. You got all your wires and stuff underneath here. And the fan itself, once this plate is removed, can just be lifted up and it kind of tilts off out of a cup. So you've got a cup up in there and there's a ball at the top of the fan that's actually sitting inside of that cup, and that holds it and allows the fan to rotate and also level itself. But it makes it real easy to remove the fan once you've got the screws loose. You just gotta lift it up out of that cup. There we go. And just like that, we got the ceiling fan loose from the ceiling. Now to actually remove it, all we gotta do is remove these wire nuts. Right now everything is tensioned up and strained up, pulling against those nuts. And so remove the fan.
And
All we
hoping you
gotta do is
don't
remove the
drop
nuts.
it. No dropping, no electrocution.
I'm hoping that somebody put a safety line in here.
Don't
Once I get these connections undone,
count
there'll still
on
be
it.
one thing holding the fan up. Well, let's see.
I don't think so.
Ground wire. And then that blue wire. One more wire in that. Nope, no safety. All right, so if you're ever installing one of these, you might think about putting in a safety line, which would just be a piece of the copper wire that's wrapped around the fan itself and then also secured to the mounting bracket. And that way it will support itself comfortably without you having to try to hold the weight of the fan while you're connecting the wire nuts. Luckily, we're not going to be putting this back up. Remove those. No idea where it went.
Oh, it's somewhere in the entryway. I'll see if I can see it. Oh,
Got that one.
you throwing things at me?
Hey y'all, I'm a homesteader, not a contractor, so these instructions are extremely important to me and should be to you if you're trying to do this. Make sure you read through them, you understand what you're installing before you get busy doing it. So on a standard light fixture or any electrical fixture, you should see three wires. You're going to have a white wire, which is typically your common, or that's your return back to the box. And then your hot wire, which is typically going to be black. And then the green, which is your ground. Green is always ground. And occasionally, especially if you're dealing with a ceiling fan, if the ceiling fan and the light are switched separately, meaning there's a wall outlet for each, you will also find a red wire. And this is kind of the unique setup for a ceiling fan. It's called a 3-wire setup. And so this would also be a hot wire that would then be wired to the fan, whereas the black wire would be wired to the light. And so you could have separate switches, one for the fan and one for the light. But all we're running up here is lights, so all we need is one power source. So we just want to make sure we secure this power. So we're going to get a wire nut put on the end of this and probably tape this up real good with some electrical tape, just to make sure this doesn't come into contact with any kind of a ground or with the common at any time. And then we're going to fold it up inside of this small box, and that should keep everything covered and hidden. Be patient with yourself. Take your time with this stuff. This is electrical that you're messing with, so keep that in mind. Right now the wires are fine because they're inert. There's no power on them. But you want this all properly installed. Even after reading the instructions, there may be some of this that you're just kind of figuring out as you go along. The instructions don't always give the level of detail you're hoping for. So don't be afraid to experiment with the pieces parts, turn screws and loosen nuts and see how things fit together so that you can get this thing installed in your environment. I'm not putting all that on camera. You guys would just get frustrated watching me stare at pieces parts for a half hour or so until I figure things out, but there's a lot of that goes on when you're doing an install like this. Don't be afraid to climb up to the top of the ladder having no idea what you're going to do when you get up there, and spend a half hour up there figuring out exactly how this is supposed to work. You could call an electrician. So an electrician can pop open this box and install this track and probably be in and out of the house in under a half an hour, because there's not really that many moving parts here. But as a homesteader, you're going to come across these situations all the time where you've never seen this stuff before. Chances are you'll never see it again in your life. And it's going to take a little while to figure some of this stuff out. The worst part is when you're in the middle of trying to figure something out and you discover a tool that you need, and that tool is not in your toolkit at the moment. You got to make that run out to the barn to go find the tool. I'm just tightening this bracket up in place, approximately where I think it will go. I've loosened that nut so that this is a little bit flexible so I can stick the track on here. I need to actually get the power to move out to this beam, because it's this beam that allows us to move to where we need to in order to put the track out over the center of the island. So we got to get to that beam. I want to leave that loose. We want to get this bracket relatively tight, but not over tightened. That'll just make it harder to attach when we get the bracket up here. All right, that's looking pretty good. We've got our power, our ground, and our common all ready to hook up. Let's see what we do about attaching a small section of track. I'm also going to have to cut a small piece of track. So this is only a few inches that I need to go, and the track is 4 feet long. So I'm just going to cut one small piece off of it to fit over this connector and then reach out to this beam for me. And I've got to make sure I cut everything correctly, because there's conductors inside of the track, and those conductors are what gets the power to where it needs to go. So I got to study that out and get this thing cut so we can get the power moved. I don't know if I got really good footage of this, guys, but it was really difficult to undo the nut that would allow me to rotate that fitting so that it would actually line up with the beam correctly. These lighting systems are a lot more robust than what I was expecting. So this is the 45-degree angled connector that I needed. And I was worried that if I didn't have this connector perfectly square, then everything would be offline and I'd end up with this crooked frame hanging up on the ceiling, because there's actually some flexibility in this. So great engineering job. Well done, guys, making that at least a little bit flexible. We won't need it. I'm going to be able to do everything nice and square, so it'll come up perfectly square when we're done. So we cut a piece of track. That's the black section there. That's just enough track to fit in there, get our 90-degree elbow in, and get us lined up with the center of that beam. And we got one screw in there holding in place. So it's screwed off inside of the bracket there. I'll probably put another screw in this one just to make sure it can handle the weight. You're only required to have a screw at either end of the track. I'm probably going to put a few more in the tracks, especially when I'm mounting an 8-foot section. I'm not going to put a screw at either end. I'll put some screws in the middle as well. It's just an aluminum track, very easy to just grab any drill bit and drill a hole through it. So it's easy enough to put the screws where you need to, at least when you're mounting it directly to the ceiling like this. It's a pretty easy install so far. Well, we've had some complications here trying to get this lighting to work. Y'all, this is not the easiest of installs. You're working overhead, first of all, which is always going to be difficult. Then we're 10 feet off the ground to get to the ceiling too. Y'all can see we've gotten a little bit further along in the project, and installing this, as far as working with it as a material, is not that bad. It's just an aluminum strip, and there's some plastic and copper wiring also inside of these tracks. But cutting it with a hacksaw is a piece of cake. It goes through like butter. Aluminum is very easy to cut. The problem is, once we get it mounted and installed, things have a tendency not to work. So we've got a light working on one side of that L connector, and on the other side we've got no power. When we take a good close look at it, up here in this corner, it appears that everything is properly connected, and yet power's not going through. So to figure out exactly what's going on and why we're having such difficulty, I'm going to grab my multimeter. We're going to look for continuity and see if we can find where this thing is breaking apart. So what I want to check about the track is actually the conductors. So there are copper conductors, 2 on one side of the track and 1 on the other side of the track. And that's going to be your hot, your common, and your ground. They need to be continuous. When they get to the end of a piece of track and then they hit a connector like this L connector, there's a piece of wire that will connect from the piece of copper in one track to the piece of copper in the other track so that you get a continuous circuit. And so we can check these circuits to make sure they're all right. We just set up our meter to give us a tone if there's a continuous piece of copper or something that could conduct electricity, like that wire or that wire. Or we could check the copper inside of the track. So if we're getting tone, that means we do have a continuous connection. But when we look to the connector, things get a little bit weak. So we have no signal here. That's telling me that there is something wrong right here in this edge of the track, right at the very end, where this conductor is not long enough, and it just happens to be the common. So we're not able to make a complete circuit when we get into the connector or in the next track beyond. A very close examination of the track and connector shows me that there is a tiny bit of a gap here. So right here at the very edge, we're not quite making a good enough connection. So I'm going to have to pull these tracks down off of the ceiling to pick up some slack and see if we can't get those to connect up a little bit tighter. Now this is supposed to be a DIY product. You really shouldn't need to pull out a multimeter in order to do a DIY install. And I think I know why this connector is not hooking up correctly. Let's take a closer look at what's going on inside of the track where you can't typically see. And then inside of the track, there are some plastic strips. These plastic strips are insulators that hold a couple of conductors in this one, and then the other has just the one conductor. So on one side of the track there are 2 conductors. That's going to be the common and the ground. And on the other side of the track is going to be your hot conductor. And these are just strips of copper that run through the insulator inside of the track. And you can see that all of this is very loosely fitted. You saw how easy it was to just slide these insulators out. And then these strips of copper are also just barely sitting inside of the track. So they're not terribly well secured. And that's a design consideration. So this makes it easy to make adjustments to the length of the conductor, which is what most of the information I found online explains that you need to do. Anytime you cut the track, you want to shorten the length of the conductor. You can see even in this track that the conductors are two different lengths, and they aren't supposed to be. They should be approximately the same length. And they do need to come up just short of the end of the insulator. And all of the information I could find suggested about 1/4 of an inch adjustment anytime you cut the track. The problem I'm encountering is that 1/4 inch may be too much of an adjustment. The connectors just slide into the track, and then they would make contact with the conductors that are already inside of the rails. The problem comes in if the conductor isn't long enough to reach the tab that it's supposed to connect to. There is a tiny piece of an insulator right here that's going to prevent that copper from sliding any further into the connector than right there. And that means the connection has to take place in this gap, which is approximately 1/4 inch. And they're telling you to trim that 1/4 inch off. I think I'm going to from this point forward, and I would recommend to you, if you need to make that adjustment, do not make the 1/4 inch adjustment that they're recommending. Make the 1/8 of an inch adjustment for this. Just barely trim off enough to allow it to clear here. You may not be able to bottom the track out in the fitting, but that's okay. You're going to put a cover or a sleeve over the top of it, and that way any small gap here won't matter. What will matter is making sure that we get the copper all the way on top of this connecting point. One of the biggest reasons we wanted the track lighting was how easy it is to add and remove fixtures. It allows you to adjust your lighting for whatever you're doing, even on a day-to-day basis in the kitchen. So this connector is loose. It has only one little set screw. I wouldn't recommend tightening these up super tight. These aluminum rails are very flexible and they will twist and turn. It makes it easy to get them onto the ceiling. If there's any imperfections in the ceiling, it won't matter. But it also means that everything doesn't fit up quite as tight as you might like. Getting these connectors to go into the track in the first place is fairly difficult. They don't line up perfectly. They don't slide easily into place. In this case, we just haven't made a good enough connection to the conductor to allow electricity to flow. So I'm going to pull this track down real quick and we'll see if we can reseat the connector. All right, well, our problem was right here, and with that track out of the way now, maybe I can get this connector to seat a little more securely in the track. Appears to be as far as that's going to go. And grab my meter, we'll check the continuity. And just like that, we have a new lighting fixture. But it's not just one fixture. We now have 6 new lights in the kitchen. We've got most of the track up. This is actually about 2/3 of the track we're going to be installing. I still have another small piece and then another long one to install back here. But this is essentially what we're doing, is getting all of these lights spread out as much as we can here in the kitchen to give as much general downward light as possible. This project took a few more days than was anticipated. I thought this was going to be pretty simple. I've cut aluminum before, so I wasn't worried about cutting the track down to size, and it did cut very easily. I was not, however, expecting to have so much difficulty with these connectors. These connectors are really, they're loose. They're not tightly manufactured, and that's deliberate. It is easier to make sure that you've got a connection if there's a little bit of flexibility and room to work with, especially if you're stretching 8 feet across some rafters, trying to get everything in a straight line.
It's really useful if there's some wiggle room in things, but I think there may just be a little bit too much slop in these pieces. I would have liked for them to be a little bit more certain. When I shove the connector into the track, what I'm hoping for is at least a 95% chance that it's actually going to make a connection, or that there would be some visual indication that the connection wasn't good. I shouldn't have to take my multimeter out just to check that connection before moving on to the next one. But in the end, we got them up, and it is providing an exceptional amount of light here in the kitchen. We're very pleased with the result that we're getting, and we can still add. So we can put in spotlights or add pendants that hang down over the island here. There are many different types of light fixtures that will snap directly into the track. So this is a very versatile system. It's going to set us up well here in the kitchen, not just so that we can prepare meals and do canning, but also so that we can do filming. We want to be able to provide you some high quality video coming out of the kitchen, so that when we're telling you about how we're preserving everything that we grow out in the garden, you can see exactly what we're doing and understand the importance of why we do it the way we do. So we look forward to making a lot more videos here in this kitchen. That's why we're improving the lighting situation. It is still going to improve. There's still more lighting that we need to do, but we've got some clear air. It looks like we're going to have a couple of days without rain. It is cold, it is gray, and it's still wet, but if I can get outside and get some work done with the Silkies, we still need to get a run built for those guys. So we'll get back to the lighting when we can, and I think we're going to shift out to building chicken runs tomorrow. We do appreciate you joining us on the Return Homestead today. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, would you please do us a favor and just jump in there and go ahead and subscribe. While you've got that window open, hit that thumbs up icon. That's going to let the algorithm know you enjoyed the video, and that way they'll share it out with more people. And we'll see you next time.
The ceiling fan gives us only 4 little light bulbs that we can use to light up the entire kitchen.